everyone, I'm Ian McCarthy of Lifting for Life, and today I'm bringing you the next installment of the Lifting for Life Q&A series. And today's question comes from Evan Godby, who asks, a point that has come up several times this year in the evidence-based fitness community across social media has been in relation to unloaded training. That's just contracting muscles without any load or resistance at all. It is entirely possible that this kind of training may in fact build some muscle versus no training at all. In your opinion, could unloaded training be used to maximize one's muscle mass? So I'd first like to provide some context for this discussion before actually answering the question so that the question is intelligible to those of you who perhaps haven't been exposed to this topic. So earlier this year, a study was published. It had, I think, 6 or 8 authors on it, but the lead author was Jeremy Loenneke, and really fascinating study in which one group did conventional resistance training in the sense of using 70% of their 1 rep max on elbow flexion, by essentially biceps curls, 3 days a week over a period of 6 weeks. These were previously untrained subjects. And as one would expect, these subjects gained a significant amount of muscle. More specifically, their biceps became thicker in this period. Another group also did elbow flexion, so again a biceps curl, with no external load. They literally did this with no external load. Again, 3 times a week over a period of 6 weeks. Fascinatingly, the hypertrophy between groups was comparable. That isn't to say it was identical. I don't recall the exact numbers off the top of my head, and I encourage all of you to go and read the full text. I will link the study below. Unfortunately, the full text isn't free, but it was very similar. Again, the hypertrophy between groups was very similar, which has caused this discussion in the online evidence-based community, as Evan has said, with regard to the question of what does this mean exactly in practice for those of us who aren't untrained and who are desiring to maximize our muscle mass, and ultimately we're left with the question that Evan has asked. My answer is yes and no, and that might sound like a contradiction, but I don't think it is. I would say yes in the sense I think it's theoretically possible that one could maximize one's muscle mass without external loading. Theoretically possible, because it seems to me, as a non-expert on hypertrophy, from the literature I've read and from discussions I've had with colleagues and friends, that the mechanism of hypertrophy, barring very mechanistic explanations really on a cellular level that I largely don't understand, I think the cause of hypertrophy can be reasonably understood as the generation of a certain minimum level of muscular fatigue. And that if you do that consistently for a sustained period of time, muscles will become larger. And what this study has shown us is that you can do that with no external load. Now, the obvious objection, and this is one I've raised in discussions about this, is, well, these are untrained subjects. We can't assume that the same thing would occur in those who are resistance trained. And I would agree with that. We can't strongly conclude on the basis of this study that that's the case. But I think that is a reasonable extrapolation. I think the person who claims that will not apply to the trained person has to justify that with direct evidence. Whereas the person who says, well, I would speculate that it's possible, is taking the existing evidence and extrapolating beyond what it shows directly, given that there isn't any direct contrary evidence or overriding evidence in the case of these trained populations. So again, I would theorize or speculate or hypothesize that it's possible, that it's mechanistically possible. But do I think anyone will ever, and by the way, I'm very, very willing to change my mind on this. I don't feel that this is of profound significance in practice or something that I would particularly need to defend, I would very happily revise it in a split second if we had even one good training study. That would be more than enough to render a lot of this commentary incongruent or inconsistent with the evidence. So to get to the second part of my answer of why I would say I don't think this will ever actually happen in practice, no, I don't think it's possible. I think the issue is, first and foremost, to be very pragmatic, I don't think anyone will ever attempt this. So that would be a reason why it won't ever happen. But to speak to possibility, I would say the issue becomes the fact that as someone becomes more muscular and stronger, there will come a point at which it will be very impractical to generate the requisite level of fatigue without any external load. People just won't be able to do it. They'll get to the point where to maximize hypertrophy in their quads, the amount of unloaded work they would need to do is simply beyond what they can do. But note that that is different to saying it's impossible in the sense of it's mechanistically impossible, it couldn't ever happen. Rather, it's saying it couldn't happen in practice because it would be impractical to do that. I hope the distinction is clear. In the one case, it could never happen regardless of what one were to do ever. And in the other case, it could happen but wouldn't, because that which one would need to do to generate that response isn't something you can actually do. So that's my response. I don't think I need to expand on it further, as I would just be wasting your time. So thank you so much. I hope you found this video valuable. Again, I would encourage you to read the study below. Thank you, Evan. I hope that you watched this video. I really appreciated the question. It was an unusual one, something outside the scope of, guys, I think you should track your macros and eat protein and lift weights with an external load. I'll see you guys next time.